rounding numbers to the nearest tenth. I have this number decimal 24, which is also read as 24 hundredths. So I want to figure out where this decimal 24 falls on my decimal place value chart. So I know that my decimal dot or period falls under the ones and the tenths place value. So I'm going to write my decimal period symbol between the ones and the tenths. Next, I want to write my 2 next to the decimal symbol. And then my 4 right after the 2. And this means that the 2 falls under the tenths place value and the 4 falls under the hundredths place value. Now I go back to the question and I see what they are asking me. So they are asking me to round this number, decimal 24, to the nearest tenth. That means that I can go into the steps that I need to follow. I'll go look for the first one, which says find a place to round and then underline it. So I know that the 2 falls under the tenths place value, so I am going to underline number 2. Then I look at my next step, which is locate the neighbor number next door to the right and circle it. So I have my 2 number, which falls under the tenths place value, and I look at the neighbor number, which is the number right after the 2 on the right, and I see that it's the 4. I see that it's the 4, so it's this number 4. And now I need to circle that number, which is number 4. Number 4, I need to circle it. And then the next step is check where the neighbor falls under the rounding coaster. So this number 4, where does the 4 fall under my rounding coaster? So I look at the rounding coaster on the right, 1 to 4, and then I look on my rounding coaster on the left, and it's 5 to 9. So I see that my 4 falls directly I see that my 4 falls directly on the left side, right here on the left side of my rounding coaster. And then I go to my next step. It says, if the neighbor number is 5 or greater, add 1 more to the number you are rounding. However, if it's 4 or less, let it rest. And that means that leave the number you are rounding the same. So, what's the number that I'm rounding? It's 2. And now I check the 4, which is the neighbor number, well, where it fell on my rounding coaster, and I see that it fell on the left, right here, 4. And I go back to the last step. It says that if it's 4 or less, if that neighbor number falls under 4 or less on the rounding coaster, that means that the number that I'm rounding stays the same. Decimal 24. When I round it up to the nearest tenth, becomes decimal 2. Why is that? That's because decimal 24 has a neighbor number of 4 or less, and that means that the number that we are rounding stays the same. It doesn't change.